The story begins in an orphanage in California, where a boy named Calvin is playing basketball with his friends Murph and Reg. In the middle of the game, Ox, the bully of the group, shows up and mocks Calvin for being short. He challenges him to a one-on-one game, betting his shirt. Murph and Reg tell Calvin not to do it, but Calvin is tired of being pushed around, so he accepts. He ends up losing the game, and Ox not only keeps the shirt, but also rips it apart in front of everyone. Calvin tries to stay calm and says that one day, when a family adopts him, they will buy him lots of new shirts. Ox laughs and tells him that no one will ever want to adopt him, but Calvin insists that someone will because he is special. That night, as he watches a happy family on TV, Calvin says that he dreams of having one like that. The orphanage director, Stan, turns off the television and reminds the kids that they have to go sell candy at the Staples Center, where the Los Angeles Knights play. The boys reluctantly go, but Calvin can barely sell anything. Outside the arena, he and Murph watch the game from a distance, just as Calvin's favorite player, Tracy, misses the final shot and the team loses. Calvin complains about how badly they have been playing lately, but Murph tells him to keep selling. While they look for someone to buy candy, Calvin spots the team's coach, Wagner, and goes up to him. They talk about the loss, and surprisingly, they share the same opinion about what went wrong. Wagner asks why he is out there alone, and Calvin explains that he lives in an orphanage and is selling candy to help out. The coach offers to buy some, but Calvin refuses the money because he is not sure it will actually go to the orphanage. Impressed by his honesty, Wagner tells him he will get him tickets for the next game. Calvin gets excited and runs to tell Murph. The next day, several couples arrive at the orphanage looking to adopt children. Calvin is convinced that today will be his lucky day, but Ox mocks him again, saying families only want the younger kids. Calvin feels discouraged and wonders if he will ever have a family. Later, Sister Teresa arrives with a box of donations. As she hands out clothes, a pair of old sneakers falls out and catches Calvin's attention. He asks if she knows who they belong to, and she vaguely remembers they once belonged to a famous player. Calvin tries them on and they fit perfectly. Looking closely, he notices the letters MJ written on the side. Immediately, he thinks they might have belonged to Michael Jordan. His friends are amazed, but Ox steps in again and tries to grab them to check. Calvin refuses to give them up, but Ox says there is no way something that valuable would end up in an orphanage. Finally, Ox snatches the sneakers and throws them onto the power lines outside. Calvin stares at them hanging there, frustrated and sad, and walks away with his friends. That night, as it rains outside, Calvin wakes Murph up, determined to get the sneakers back. Murph tells him that maybe Ox was right and that the shoes probably are not Michael Jordan's, but Calvin insists they are. With Murph and Reg's help, he sneaks out into the yard and climbs a tree to reach them. Just as he grabs the shoes, lightning strikes the power line and a jolt of electricity hits him. Calvin falls to the ground, dazed but unharmed. When he looks at the shoes, he notices glowing sparks coming from them and he is amazed. The next day, he finds the tickets that Wagner gave him and decides to invite Murph and Reg to the Los Angeles Knights game. When Ox sees them getting ready to go, he threatens to tell Stan, so Calvin invites him to avoid trouble. At the stadium, the kids are thrilled to see the team play, although the Knights cannot seem to do anything right. By halftime, they are losing and Coach Frank is furious. As the players head to the locker room, he stops Tracy, the team star, and orders him to take part in a halftime show to entertain the crowd. Tracy does not want to do it, but he has no choice. Frank announces that a fan will be randomly chosen to play a one-on-one game against Tracy, and the winning number turns out to be Calvin's. The boy cannot believe it and runs down to the court as the crowd cheers wildly. Frank tells Tracy to let the kid score a couple of times, but Tracy agrees to let him score only once. When the game starts, Calvin surprises everyone. He dribbles past Tracy and scores the first point. The audience erupts in applause. Tracy smiles in disbelief until Calvin scores again with an even more impressive move. Calvin himself does not understand how he is playing so well. Now annoyed, Tracy decides to take it seriously, but Calvin throws the ball off the backboard and dunks it spectacularly, leaving the entire stadium in shock. Outside the arena, Stan sits in his van playing chess, completely unaware of what is happening inside. Meanwhile, Frank, noticing the crowd's reaction, realizes Calvin's huge publicity potential and rushes out to find Stan. The next day, Frank and Wagner visit the orphanage. Frank suggests that Calvin should join the team, but Wagner does not take it seriously. He says the kid is way too short for the NBA. Frank replies that he is not looking for talent, just to fill the seats. Then he offers Stan $5,000 to let Calvin play one game with the team. Stan, thrilled by the money, accepts without hesitation. Later, Calvin excitedly tells his friends everything that happened. They still cannot believe it. Murph asks how he managed to play so well, and Calvin admits he does not know, only that ever since he put on those shoes, something has changed. Murph hands him a basketball, and Calvin shoots again and does not miss. Murph jokes that he is like a basketball Cinderella, and Calvin agrees, but asks him to keep it a secret. However, Ox has been eavesdropping, and now he knows the shoes have something special. That night, Calvin arrives at the Staples Center for his first day as part of the Los Angeles Knights, with Murph and Reg tagging along, full of excitement. Inside the locker room, Calvin greets the players and apologizes to Tracy for embarrassing him during the last game. Tracy tells him not to worry, and another player, Jode, offers him the locker next to his. A few moments later, Frank walks in holding an official team jersey and a brand new pair of sneakers. Calvin says he would rather wear his own, the ones he brought from the orphanage. Frank explains that all players must wear the same shoes, but Calvin insists he plays better with his. Frank laughs and tells him not to worry, that he will not actually be playing that night anyway. Calvin feels a bit disappointed and goes to talk to Wagner to understand what is really going on. Wagner explains that Frank only brought him in to attract fans and sell tickets, though he assures Calvin it is still an honor to be part of the team. Calvin is not entirely convinced, but he tries to enjoy the moment. During the game, Calvin sits on the bench watching his idols play live. However, the Knights start losing again, and Wagner calls for a timeout. While the coach tries to reorganize the team, Calvin gathers the courage to suggest a play that might help. Wagner listens to his idea and tells Tracy to try it. Tracy refuses to take orders from a kid, but Wagner insists. Then, to everyone's surprise, Wagner substitutes one of the players and sends Calvin into the game. Frank panics and asks if he is sure about this, but Wagner says he is the coach and knows what he is doing. When the game resumes, Calvin suddenly realizes he is not wearing his special sneakers and panic sets in. Tracy passes him the ball, but Calvin keeps passing it back, unsure of what to do. Finally, he calls a timeout and says he needs to use the bathroom. He runs straight to the locker room, puts on his shoes, and returns to the court determined. He executes the play he suggested to Wagner, scores several points, and lifts the entire team's spirit. The crowd goes wild, Wagner cannot believe it, and Frank, watching proudly from the bench, declares himself a genius for signing him. Calvin ends up winning the game for the Knights, becoming the new basketball sensation. The next day, the team officially signs him with a contract, and his story goes viral on sports shows. While Calvin packs his things to leave the orphanage and join the team on their next trip, Stan walks into his room. He tells Calvin that he is proud of him, but also warns him that now many people will want to adopt him only for money. Calvin does not understand what he means, so Stan explains that according to the contract, as long as he is Calvin's legal guardian, no one else can adopt him. Later, Calvin travels with the team to the next city. During the flight, Wagner asks Tracy to mentor him and also to share a room with him. Tracy tries to refuse, but Wagner reminds him that it is an order. When they arrive at the hotel, Calvin cannot contain his excitement about being his idol's roommate. Tracy, on the other hand, is not happy about it at all. That night, he gets ready to go out, and Calvin asks if he can come along. Tracy tells him no, that he needs to go alone and advises him to stay in the room. Before leaving, he shows Calvin how to use room service to order whatever he wants. Calvin, surprised, asks if he can really get things for free, and Tracy tells him to give it a try. After Tracy leaves, Calvin decides to test room service and soon confirms that he can order anything he wants. He ends up ordering way too much food. When Tracy returns later with a woman named Jonna, he finds the room completely trashed and Calvin lying among piles of food. Disappointed, he tells him to get up, and Calvin locks himself in the bathroom. Jonna walks in and asks why the room is such a mess, and Tracy makes up an excuse. But right then, Calvin comes out of the bathroom, and Johnny is thrilled to meet him. They all go out together, and Tracy becomes jealous when he sees Jonna hugging Calvin. Jonna mentions that Tracy never told her about his roommate, and he tries to play it off. Calvin says they are good friends and that he even calls him Tea Time, which Jonna finds adorable. She asks if Tracy has a nickname for him, but he says no. That night, back in the room, Calvin asks Tracy if they can say a prayer before going to bed. He ends up blessing him, and Tracy is surprised. Calvin asks if he is not going to bless his parents, but Tracy replies that they are gone. Calvin feels sorry and says they are alike because he is an orphan too. Then he falls asleep and starts snoring loudly, keeping Tracy awake all night. The next morning, Wagner notices that Tracy looks exhausted. Calvin interrupts, saying that Jonna came to their room and that they returned after midnight. Wagner gets upset, reminds Tracy that this breaks team rules, and warns him that if it happens again, he will be suspended. Later, Tracy is furious with Calvin for talking too much, but the boy apologizes. Tracy tells him that from now on, things will be done differently. Soon after, the next game begins, and Calvin shines once again on the court, helping the Knights win. His performance keeps improving, and the team quickly becomes one of the best in the league. Over time, Calvin starts sending gifts to his friends at the orphanage. But when he visits them, Ox tries to steal his magical sneakers. Stan steps in and warns Ox to stay away from Calvin, making it clear that the boy is very valuable to him. The next day, Calvin is playing in the hotel room with Jode while Tracy gets ready to go out to buy medicine for his allergies and some sleeping pills. Calvin wants to go with him, but Tracy says no. Calvin looks disappointed, and Jode explains that Tracy does not even get along with his own family. Calvin is surprised because he thought his parents had passed away, but Jode tells him that Tracy just does not talk to his father. Later, when Tracy leaves in his car, Calvin appears hiding in the back seat and says he took the stairs to catch up with him. At the pharmacy, Tracy gets confused and accidentally takes the sleeping pills instead of his allergy medicine. When Tracy returns to the car, he starts to feel dizzy until he completely falls asleep, leaving Calvin to take care of getting him back to the hotel. The next morning, Tracy learns that Calvin won't be allowed to play in the next game for breaking curfew the night before. Confused, Tracy asks what happened, and Jode reminds him that he fell asleep. So who did he think brought him back to the hotel? That's when Tracy realizes everything and thanks Calvin for covering for him. He even gives him a new nickname, Sea Dog, which makes the boy very happy. The following day, Calvin complains to Reg that he didn't study for his geometry test. Then he notices several couples visiting the orphanage. When Murph arrives, Calvin asks what's going on, and he explains that those families are there to see him. Calvin gets excited, but Murph seems disappointed, saying that it doesn't help the other kids. Seeing him sad, Calvin starts to wonder what's really happening, especially because Stan told him no one could adopt him. Meanwhile, Stan is arguing on the phone with Wagner, angry that the coach sent families interested in adopting Calvin. Wagner tells him that the contract doesn't forbid it, but Stan insists that he's Calvin's legal guardian and has the final say. When Calvin walks into the office and confronts him, Stan repeats that those families only want to take advantage of his fame and money. Calvin says that he still wants to meet them, and Stan agrees, but with ulterior motives. A while later, Calvin meets the supposed candidate couples, but all of them act very strangely. He soon discovers that Stan hired them to make him lose interest in being adopted. Disappointed, Calvin decides to go to Tracy's house for advice. When he arrives, he tells him that he's having a bad day. His best friend is mad at him, Stan tricked him, and he doesn't understand anything about geometry. Seeing how frustrated he is, Tracy says he can help. But first, Calvin calls Murph to make up and invites him to join them. Then, Tracy paints the walls with triangles and shapes to teach him geometry in a fun way. They end up playing with paint, and when Murph arrives, the three of them have fun together like a family. The next day, the Knights win another game, and Frank congratulates Tracy and Calvin for their great teamwork. He tells them that if they win one more game, they'll make it to the playoffs. Later, Reg and Murph asked Calvin if he's found an adoptive family yet. Calvin says no, and Murph hints that maybe he's waiting for Tracy to adopt him. Calvin laughs, saying that's impossible since Tracy doesn't even talk to his own father. His friends are surprised and can't understand how someone can have a father and not want to see him. The next day, Calvin decides to do something about it. He brings Tracy's father to his house to surprise him, but the reaction isn't what he expected. Tracy gets furious, yells at Calvin not to meddle in his personal life, and throws him out. That night, the Knights lose their game, and Wagner explodes in anger because now they'll have to face a much tougher team to make it to the playoffs. He also scolds Tracy and Calvin for not playing well together and demands that they fix their issues. When Wagner leaves, Tracy tries to talk to Calvin to calm things down, but the boy has already disappeared from the locker room. The next morning, Calvin returns to the orphanage feeling down and tells his friends that maybe he'll never be adopted. Murph tries to cheer him up, telling him not to lose hope. At that moment, a very kind couple, Mr. and Mrs. Boyd, show up, interested in meeting him. Calvin gets excited at the thought of finally having a family. Seeing this, Stan starts to worry. He asks Ox if he's sure that Calvin's sneakers are the secret behind his talent, and Ox confirms it. So Stan comes up with a plan. He brings Calvin a new pair of shoes and convinces him to wear them, saying the Boyds will think he looks better that way. Calvin hesitates, but eventually agrees and gives his precious sneakers to Murph to keep safe. That night, while Calvin has dinner with the Boyds and everything seems perfect, Murph decides to try on the magic shoes. Murph throws a ball at the hoop, but completely misses. He realizes that the sneakers only work for Calvin. His moment is interrupted when Ox and other kids walk into the room, followed by Stan, who tries to find out where the shoes are hidden. To pressure him, Stan even burns part of a photo of Murph's mother. Desperate, Murph reveals where the sneakers are hidden. Stan takes them and leaves. Later, Stan visits a dangerous loan shark named Mr. Williams and asks for $100,000 to bet against the Knights in their next game. Williams asks why he's so confident, and Stan replies that he has a feeling Calvin will have a very bad night. Meanwhile, Tracy can't stop thinking about Calvin. Jana notices he misses the boy and encourages him to make things right. Tracy decides to do it, remembering how much fun they had together and how Calvin helped him see things differently. On the other hand, the dinner with the Boyds goes so well that they decide to move forward with Calvin's adoption. The next day, Calvin tells Tracy that he's finally going to have parents. Tracy is surprised but congratulates him, saying he's a very lucky kid. Curious, Calvin asks what he wanted to talk about earlier, but Tracy just says it wasn't important. Suddenly, Calvin gets an urgent call from Murph. Stan took the sneakers. Even though the most important game of the season is about to start, Calvin runs out of the stadium to get them back. When Wagner notices Calvin is gone, the team is forced to play without him. Meanwhile, Calvin, Murph, Reg, and the other kids from the orphanage manage to catch Stan and tie him to a chair. They demand he reveal the code to the safe where he hid the shoes, but he refuses. Just as Ox enters the room and seems ready to free him, Calvin stops him, telling him that Stan never cared about any of them. Ox hesitates for a moment, then realizes Calvin is right. He opens the safe and gives the shoes to Calvin. The kids all run together toward the stadium, but Stan manages to break free and calls Mr. Williams to send his men after them. Even so, Calvin and his friends escape and make it to the game, just as Stan catches up with them at the entrance. He tries to stop Calvin, but the boy knocks him down with his scooter. Calvin rushes into the arena and sees that the Knights are losing. Wagner asks where he's been, but Calvin can't explain himself in time. So the coach tells him that, for arriving so late, he'll have to stay on the bench, even though there's only 1 quarter left to play. But Tracy stands up for him, reminding Wagner that they wouldn't even be there without Calvin. His teammates agree, and Wagner finally lets him back in the game. Calvin starts scoring points and helps the team close the gap. They're only 1 point behind when one of his sneakers breaks. Sadly, he tells Tracy that his talent depends on his shoes. Tracy first thinks he's joking, but Calvin insists he's serious. Tracy then encourages him to be brave and keep fighting, reminding him that they can still win. In the final play, Calvin leads the team with perfect timing and, after getting past one of the rival team's best players, passes the ball to Tracy. Tracy scores the winning points, sending the Knights to the playoffs. Everyone celebrates, but Calvin feels a bit sad, thinking he might never see Tracy again. Soon after, Mr. and Mrs. Boyd enter the locker room to congratulate him. Calvin tells them to wait for him in the parking lot and goes to say goodbye to Wagner, who assures him he'll always have a place on the team. Calvin returns to the court, reflecting on everything that has happened over the past few weeks. Then he meets the Boyds in the parking lot, but decides to go back to the orphanage instead. When Murph sees him, he's surprised that Calvin turned down the Boyds. Calvin admits he didn't expect it either, but something just didn't feel right. The next day, while Calvin is playing outside, Ox asks him what the best part of being in the NBA was. Without hesitating, Calvin answers, room service, meaning getting free food at hotels. Ox is surprised and just laughs. Suddenly, they hear Tracy's voice nearby, asking if he's serious. Calvin turns around, shocked to see him, and asks what he's doing there. Tracy tells him that he's with the team because the Knights are now sponsoring the orphanage. But most importantly, he tells Calvin that he wants to adopt him as his son. Overwhelmed with joy, Calvin hugs him tightly. When he notices Murph looking a little sad, Calvin begs Tracy to adopt his friend too. Tracy agrees and Murph bursts with happiness. Curiously, no one ever sees Stan again after that day. Over time, Reg is also adopted and sends a photo to Calvin and Murph with her new parents, making the 3 friends happier than ever, now a real family, thanks to Tracy and the Knights. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think about this movie.